Then there's climate, which is essentially a new industrial revolution in our view, which means we're rethinking how proteins are made, how materials are made, we're rethinking how energy is produced, we're rethinking how logistics work, we're rethinking the entire economy.
High five on that one.
Very excited. Let's do this. Awesome. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. There are these elder statesmen, and it's mostly elder statesmen, who are getting in the way of positive improvements and change. And I think that we believe the entrepreneurs who are on the ground building products, services for a new generation of buyers, that's where the actual change is going to occur.
Really?
You know what I mean? That was like, shit.
What?
You don't want to invest?
That's bullshit.
That's bullshit. Yeah, bullshit. Bullshit.
Welcome to The Switch, not just another podcast, but a show where we entertain you and where we educate you in all matter subjects that has to do with the transition you and me, need to do in order to get the balance back into this earth we are living on. And with me, of course, I have my team, Emil, Jacob. Hello, there you are. And me, myself, Kristina Hagström-Ilievska, the naive optimist with a bit of a rebellic streak that likes to push the bullshit button when I see that there is something that we're not discussing. But I also want to make sure to elevate all the good things and initiatives that are out there. And then I use this one. You see?
Awesome.
Twinkles. There we go. Today, I'm super excited about our guest. He made a great impression on me when we met in Oslo and Clean Tech Scandinavia. And what he is, we will dive into. His background is that he's an early stage investor and a mentor, focusing on pre-seed and seed. He's an investment partner at Giant Ventures. Remember that name? Giant exists to build and back purpose-driven companies, solving the world's biggest problems. Period. He was previously the co-founder and CEO of Starcity, a global co-living company with locations on multiple continents, hundreds of employees, and raised over $50 million in venture capital. This dude knows what he's talking about, not only how to get it, but now he wants to invest in the right thing again. But also we will hear from him about the actual journey he went on to become where he is today. Welcome to The Switch!
Woo-hoo! Thanks for having me. Very excited to be here. Jag pratar lite svenska. But today we'll speak in English because I don't want to embarrass myself.
And also because the audience here won't understand if we speak Swedish. So.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So,
global.
Global.
Love it.
Yeah.
Very excited.
Very excited.
Very awesome.
You were... That must be like the first one who actually pushes it so early. High five on that one.
Very excited. Let's do this.
Good. As you see, this is going to be a very feisty show. We really want to get to know a little bit more about you.
Sure.
And that's why we are going to roll the wheel of questions. Are you ready for that?
Here we go.
Here we go.
Wheel of questions.
If you could eat one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Sushi, hands down. Delicious, flavorful, nutritious, also paired with great sake and beer, if that counts. Can I also include that?
Is that on the healthy part or is that on the...
Absolutely.
Which sushi do you like most?
Well, there's toro, tuna, the fatty tuna, delicious.
Okay.
And then also just like good salmon or laks.
Yeah, actually the easy, like the, just the
simple,
original one.
Clean, high quality, local, sustainable. That's my cup of tea.
I like that.
But no tea, coffee.
Okay, we can't be that healthy. Let's not go there. Let's see what more we have in the wheel.
Wheel of questions. What did you want to be when you were a kid?
One of the first things I drew as a kid was very tall buildings. And I told my kindergarten teacher, I was like, I want to be a businessman. And she was like, what kind of businessman? I was like, a businessman. I had no idea what that was, but I just like had seen some movies and I thought it was cool to like carry a briefcase and wear a suit every day.
Okay.
So that was my ambition.
And the tall building, was that the
I was going to work in one of those.
You were going to work?
Yeah.
Corner office?
Out in the pods with everybody else, a man of the people.
And then the big question, how did it go with the dream?
Well, here we are.
Here we are.
I'm wearing a suit. I'm in a tall building.
Are you in a corner office?
I'm out in the pods.
Yeah.
In a WeWork.
There you go. It's an office of your own anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're in the pod.
Yeah, there you go.
Cool. Let's go there. Your journey.
I like to tell people that I won the lottery. I was born in Palo Alto, California in the 1980s, right? And Palo Alto is the heart of Silicon Valley, right? It's the beating heart of Silicon Valley. My father was a professor at Stanford. My mother was also an educator. So they ran this little experiment on the family, which is that they also had students from the university live with us. So at any given time, we had a couple different engineering students living with us. So you can imagine this like small little family and like a 6'8" Nigerian guy and a Norwegian guy named Olaf and like this couple Rob and Stacy living with us. Our neighbors would look over the fence and be like, what's going on over there? But we loved it because we learned about computers, we learned about technology, we played the first Atari game. And in my high school was, Steve Wozniak, the founder of Apple's son, the founder of Atari's
It's
kid.
almost like...
It was like right there, like the heart of Silicon Valley.
Must be such an inspiring environment.
Fast forward, I graduated from university and I landed my first internship. Now, my first internship was at Cushman & Wakefield, this like global real estate and advisory consulting company. And I showed up with my like pleated pants and my little polo shirt, and I would show up very early and leave very late. And I learned about how to build.
A-class student.
Thank you very much. And then sometimes they were like, "We don't really have much for you to do," and I was like, "But I'm here, and check off the box." So. We actually were building the first like real estate database. It was like a really big commercial real estate database, and I helped out on that. And then once I graduated from university, they offered me a full-time job as an analyst. Now this was right in the middle of 2006, the mid-2000s, and the market was doing very well. And then
that was after the crash.
The bottom fell out, right? I was like poor before I joined, and I was poor after it. What was cool about it though was that I came back to my roots. So as the market had gotten sort of the life sucked out of it, all of these startups were moving to San Francisco. Now this was in the Web 2.0 revolution, right? The iPhone had just been invented. Steve Jobs had just announced that you can make apps. Anybody can make apps, and companies like Dropbox and Airbnb were all starting their companies in San Francisco. And we were living there during that time, and it exploded, right? And
Again, in the middle of the inspiration, yeah?
It was like, I was like just in a hot tub and just enjoying, you know what I mean? Not it was like a theoretical hot tub of like super cool stuff happening. Hot tub time machine. No, and what I did was, my first phone call from an old friend was this guy, Tripp Adler, who was in the second batch of Y Combinator. Now, everybody knows the name Y Combinator now, but back then it was like this small little accelerator incubator that gave companies $25,000 or $12,000 at the time to get their idea off the ground.
All right.
He was in the second batch, and he calls me and he's like, "Hey, John, we just raised our Series A from, I think it was Redpoint and some other like big name venture capital." And I was like, first of all, who gave you $10 million and why? and then how can I help you? And he's like, well, we need to build an office. We need to figure out how to grow our team. This is all stuff that I had learned in my internship and the job I was working at.
Yeah.
So I started by helping him. And then I started to help all companies that had graduated from Y Combinator. So that was companies like
Optima. So you were mentoring already then, though?
Well, I was helping them in the way that I knew, which was like finding and building these offices and then helping them to sort of scale out the physical like space. And then I got a passenger seat as they thought about funding, as they thought about like launches, as they thought about all of these things. So for that entire decade, the sort of mid 2010s, I saw these companies go from 2 people to 20 people to 200 people to global. It was like overnight, and it was like so invigorating. What was funny is I remember I was having dinner with a handful of entrepreneurs, and I was pitching them on the idea for Starcity, which we'll get into. And most of them were like, you know, they on the shoulder, they were like, Jon, are you sure you want to do this? You know what I mean? Like, are you really sure you want to become an entrepreneur? Like, you seem like you have a pretty good life. You're making good money. Like, you seem like your mental health is in a good place. Like, it was almost like they were warning me about this journey I was about to go on.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
And so like that was, I eventually ended up starting the company.
How did you feel when you got those warnings? Were you like,
I was like, how are you giving me this advice? You just started a company. Exactly, you know what I mean? Like, how is that even, a thing? But I think that what it was compassion from friends in saying, hey man, this is hard. Like, starting a business is a very difficult journey that you're about to go on, and you just need to understand that.
So what happened then? So when you actually didn't listen to them and you got started, or?
So I was contemplating between 3 different ideas.
Yeah.
One was a organic juice company. My wife is like, thank God you didn't do that one. The other idea was around electric charging garages, because I knew that Tesla was growing, electric charging was growing. And Giant actually recently funded an idea that was very similar to this recently.
Yeah.
I think it was good I didn't start it then, because it was like way advanced. The EV market hadn't grown very big at that time. And then the third idea was I wanted to create a affordable, fast way for people to move to cities that built more community, right? Now, we knew at the time, and this was the early 2010s, that WeWork had been extraordinarily successful and was growing very fast for creating office community and these really easy plug-and-play places for people to work.
All over
but
the world,
they hadn't done it for living space yet, and they eventually would launch this company called We Live, which was a disaster. But no one had done it for housing. And if you thought about moving to San Francisco or New York or London or Stockholm, even at this time,
impossible.
very expensive for anybody who's just graduating college or wants to work in technology or anything like that. So I was like, how do I recreate that wonderful experience of what I had during my childhood, of all these people living under one roof? How do I use technology to make it easy to click a button and move in overnight, right? How do I create a experience for people to live more harmoniously and meet new people, but then also flex out when they need to and get their own place with like a significant other or other friends? And we started Starcity in 2016. Now, a quick note about co-founders, because I think your audience is a lot of entrepreneurs. My co-founders, Mo, Jesse, and Josh, amazing people, and I love them to this day. They're like brothers to me. They had started a prior company that I had invested in, and it was called Savvy, and it was a way for people to get together in small groups and like organize a dinner party, right?
Yeah.
And they had lost my money, and they were extraordinarily transparent about it, right? They, like most startups, when you're an investor, will be like, we're doing really well, and then they'll die. And you're like, what happened? I thought you should tell us what's wrong and what's good, and we can help. Jesse, Mo, and Josh were very transparent, very honest, and they were like, it's going really well. Jon, it's not going very well. Jon, we lost your money. And right as they pitched me, or right as they explained that to me, I was like, they were like, well, if we can find some more capital, we will keep the company alive. And I was like, well, I can't really help you on that because I have this new idea that I'm working on. So I walk out of the coffee shop, and I was like, I looked at myself and I was like, I think those guys would make great co-founders. So I walked back in and I was like, hey, I know you just lost the money, but like, I have this new idea. Do you want to come in and work on it? And I'll never forget, Mo was immediately like, yes, I'm in.
He didn't even know the idea though.
Yeah, he thought a little bit about the idea, and then eventually I explained it to them, and they were like, we said we would never work on another startup again, but I think we'll do this one.
Cool.
We then applied to Y Combinator, to like bring it full circle to like this entire community that had brought so much to me as a business person. and we were accepted, and it was really an amazing experience. The 3-month sprint, I like to call it like the NBA finals, right? It's like the most intense part of a startup.
Pitching, learning, pitching, learning.
Yeah, and a lot of it is actually early on is actually quite simple. Like they teach you how to communicate, right? Like what's your one-liner? Like what's your mission, right? And don't like go out to conferences, don't do all the stuff that like you see in the media about startups. Just talk to customers and build product. Talk to customers and build product over and over and over and over again. And then at the end, you do this thing called demo day, which is obviously, we know what those are today. They're like, you're showing off your company into a whole group of investors. Now, our demo day, we get on stage, we do our presentation, and we were like really jazzed about it. You can tell I'm an excitable person. So I got very, very like pumped up because I was like, we're making cities affordable for people to live. Like it costs $3,000 a month to live in San Francisco in a studio apartment. We're delivering at $1,000 a month, right? And like that's game changing. And so we got a lot of investors being like, they basically like your company to talk with you afterwards. And so we had 160 likes on that day, which was like twice more than the average. And we were like, yes, feeling very confident about ourselves,
Yeah.
And then we get down to having these meetings with the investors and they're like, wow, you're solving affordable housing. Thank you for doing that. That's awesome. We just wanted to hear how you were going to do it. Good luck to you.
Really?
That was like, shit.
What?
You don't want to invest?
That's bullshit.
That's bullshit. Yeah, bullshit. But then, then I realized that like we were in a very difficult space. We were building in the physical. We were building in the digital. It was very regulated. It was not sort of quote unquote venture backable at that time, right? It would seem like it was a little bit off model for most VCs. We eventually actually were able to close our seed round and had great, investors, NEA, Social Capital, and a bunch of others. And that was actually where I met Cameron McLean, who I work with today at Giant Ventures. He put an angel check into the company.
Right.
And so, but that was sort of like the launch of the company. And we opened our first location on Gilbert Street in San Francisco, and I'll never forget this. We had 1,000 people apply to move in. We only had 6 rooms, and it was like we were off to the races. It was like such an exciting and invigorating time.
So just tell me about the business models. You actually like built, sold, or rented.
Yeah.
And created a community around it.
Yeah, so we did a couple things, right? So we were what I would call a vertically integrated housing provider. So we had an entire website where you could sign up online as a customer and move into a fully furnished suite. You can move in for 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months, whatever you wanted.
Yeah.
On the back end, we started off leasing long-term these buildings, and then we would do short-term leases to the customers, right? And then the owner or the landlord would pay to build it out to our specifications. Now, we knew that was not the right business model long term. So when we raised our Series A from Bullpen Capital and a handful of others, our first board meeting, we're like, we're throwing away that business model and we're going to actually buy the buildings because we think that's the best way to create long-term value for the company.
Yeah.
And that thesis ended up being mostly true, and a lot of the most successful companies in our space are now doing that. They're owning the buildings because the lease model, as is proven by the rise and fall of WeWork, is a pretty difficult business model to actually make work. And financially, it creates a ton of obligations for a business. And so, whereas ownership, you have an asset on your balance sheet, that's a much more valuable type of business. So we knew that we wanted to shift to that long term. But we didn't do that until our Series A fundraise.
When I listen to you, I mean, it's a successful journey, and even if you don't know that, it was a very successful sale in the end. And I mean, the journey sounds really fun, but I know that it's been like a lot of hardship going back through actually being there.
Yeah.
What do you have to say about that?
You can sense the pain behind my eyes, is what you're saying.
I sense it.
There's a PTSD of just like little shaky hands. I mean, what I tell founders is that your problems as a company scales go from every month to every week to every day to every hour. The bigger you get, the more complex the business gets, the more challenges and fires you have to put out.
Exactly.
We raised our Series B. One day before that was about to close, one major investor pulled out at the last minute. And I was actually supposed to go to Båstad in the summer with my wife and my family, but I had to stay home and actually finish closing out that Series B round. That was like a very difficult moment for me, for the company. We eventually pulled it off, but again, super difficult. The next big challenge was COVID, right? In the United States and in the places that we operated in, COVID shut everything down. And you can imagine that, the Saturday Night Live, comedy writing team couldn't come up with a funnier business to have during a respiratory disease pandemic than putting everybody living in tight quarters. Yeah. So we had our occupancy dropped in half, our revenue dropped in half. It was extraordinarily difficult and we got crushed. We had to raise a bridge round of financing. We had to do layoffs. Like these were harrowing experiences. And, I want any entrepreneur who's watching to know that, like, please reach out to me if you're going through difficult times, john@giant.vc. This is what I do now today, is I help entrepreneurs to understand the difficulties of founding a company, and I'm there with them as a partner, and I've been through it, right? 90% of VCs in Europe and the Nordics have never started a company before. So they come in with all of these ideas and guides and, best practices, but it's bullshit, because they've never...
You can push
It's bullshit.
Thank you.
They've never actually experienced the grind of the day-to-day of 7 days a week. Yeah, 7 days a week. I'm sorry if you're, 80 to 100 hours. And not only that, like you can't shut your brain off. Again, when the company exited, I wanted to come to a place where I could use all of those lessons learned and deploy it in a way that would feel authentic to the entrepreneurs that I'm working with.
And that is today Giant Ventures.
Giant Ventures, yes.
What problems do you want Giant helping to solve?
Giant backs companies that matter. We want to work with entrepreneurs that are solving the biggest problems and challenges to society today, which means climate, healthcare, and rethinking capitalism, right? How fintech works for not just the wealthy people, but everyday individuals, right? So when we talk about climate, there's a lot of misinformation out there, okay? There is ESG, which is a set of rules for large companies to behave well, okay? Then there's impact investing, where people take a concessionary set of returns in order to solve a certain problem. Then there's climate, which is essentially a new industrial revolution in our view, which means we're rethinking how proteins are made, how materials are made. We're rethinking how energy is produced. We're rethinking how logistics work. We're rethinking the entire economy in the context of having a healthier planet. That's a massive both business opportunity, and we see some of the most talented founders working in those areas. And by the way, coming from my experience, you're dealing with atoms and bits. It's the physical world and the digital world. So very, very, very complex. We love founders working on that kind of stuff. Healthcare is very challenged right now. In the United States, the cost of healthcare is extraordinarily high. In places like the United Kingdom, the quality of service is deteriorating, right? So how can we bring technology and tools to bear to solve the problems within that space? And then in fintech, what happens is we have a whole generation, Gen Z, who's come up on YOLOing into stock options, like AMC and crypto shit coins. Sorry, who have no financial literacy. And so how do we create tools and products that shows them better ways to invest, or better ways to manage their money, or saving for your first purchase of a home?
Yeah,
we think these are really important thematic areas to be investing in today.
So with your experience now at Giant, what kind of companies do you see as a force of doing good in these matters that you've just mentioned?
I think entrepreneurs today are waking up to the fact that we don't need more photo sharing apps or productivity tools.
Yeah.
We need to solve these societal issues, right? And the large scale companies are like barges. They move very slowly and they don't really seem to care about instilling change or positive direction. In fact, the co-founder of Giant, Tommy Stadlin, wrote a book with the former CEO of BP, John Brown. And what they did is they polled hundreds of Fortune 500 executives about instilling change in their organizations. And largely speaking, their faces like glossed over. And like they said, sort of canned lines. And I think in that moment, Tommy and Cameron as well felt strongly that all the change is going to come from startups and entrepreneurs who are scaling rapid new technologies to address these problems. And that's where we deploy our capital. We go very, very early with companies. We're often writing, $1 million to $4 million checks to get them started, right? It's a seed stage investment. And they're finding product market fit. They're hiring their first, team. They are communicating about the problem that they're working on. We work with entrepreneurs who are extremely technically talented, right? Whether they're PhDs or engineers. And one of the issues they often have is storytelling. Like how do you convey what you're working on in a compelling and concise way? And how do you get people excited about what it is that you're working on? And so we work with them on press releases, on, going on shows like this, and how do you get that message out about and evangelize the problem that you're working on and why it's so important that people come and join you on that mission.
It's super exciting. I'm just referencing now because if you look at like solar and wind, what they looked like 10 years ago was very technical, it was very engineering, and now it's more different. And comparing that to geothermal, where Basel Capital come from, if you Google that, it's very engineering.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting what you're actually saying there. Industries, companies, everything needs to change with a message and communication. Only then people get their eyes open for it.
That's exactly right. And I think that, one of the more complicated companies we recently invested in was Synonym, and we co-led that with Andreessen Horowitz. It's a biomanufacturing company. Now that sounds like word salad of like technical terms. And what they do is they build a platform for new materials and new proteins to be created. Right, so if you think about Beyond Meat, or they're a plant-based version, but if you think about all of the new proteins, new meats that are being created, this is the direction that food production is going to go.
Yeah.
And so Edward Shendorovich, who started that company, previously the founder of Notel, which was WeWork's biggest competitor, he's an excellent communicator on like how to deliver this sort of food for the next couple decades. And you can imagine the scale of that kind of problem. That's like a very, down the fairway type of investment that Giant loves.
On the topic of, what you're saying here, it's pretty interesting because you're saying the change will come from the startups and the entrepreneurs.
Yep.
We just left COP27.
Yeah.
And there has been nothing encouraging and there has been no communication. Do you think that we need to do a change on a massive scale.
Yeah.
Do you think that the entrepreneurs will actually have the strength to muster up and to do the changes? Because we're not seeing so much from the other side, right?
Yeah. Look, I think that these promises at COP have been made year after year after year. And Tommy, the co-founder of Giant, talks about this all the time. And you can't teach an old dog new tricks. There are these elder statesmen, and it's mostly elder statesmen, who are getting in the way of positive improvements and change. And I think that we believe the entrepreneurs who are on the ground building products, services for a new generation of buyers, that's where the actual change is going to occur, is that we demand geothermal, is that we demand solar and wind as a customer. Okay, let's match them with a company that delivers that now, right? And that's where the actual change is going to occur. And then we will slowly phase out these dinosaurs who don't actually make any meaningful improvements in the way that things work. And the reality is that there is a place for regulation. There is a place for, the looking back at, history. I think it's incredibly important. And let's be honest, fossil fuels have created a massive amount of improvements in society with transportation, with, energy production. That has been really important for the sort of improvement of human well-being. So now we look at this transition of energy and resources and everything like that. That could be an even larger transition and an even larger improvement in society. And so that's what we get really excited about. We're not alarmists. We don't think that the world's going to end. We're far from that. And we also think that you need to partner, you need to pair, positive capitalism, right? Business creation, products and services creation, with widgets that are meaningful and good, right? So like a Tesla is a great example of that, right? Like it completely revolutionized the car industry, who was all resistant to change. And so, how do we do that in every industry? That's what we're looking at.
That's a question I want to answer to. Last question on that topic. Honestly, that's one of the reasons this podcast is. We want to get that question answered, but I'm still will it be going fast enough? The change. Will the entrepreneurs muster up so that we can speed it up? Because I don't think that the world is going to end, but we do need to act fast.
Yeah. Well, I think that the reality is that, I was born in the 80s and my sister had this great hair and she used hairspray that apparently ruined the ozone layer, right? And great hair, ozone layer ruined. And everybody was saying at that time, I remember it vividly in our elementary school, that there was a huge hole in the ozone layer and we were all going to die before 2000.
And then we went home.
But we fixed it. Humans fixed it. We solved the problem, or it healed, or, there are ways, there are paths and resolutions. And what we know is that humans are very good at evolving. We talked about children, the pace at which they grow and the pace at which they learn. Younger generations are just so excited about that and solving big problems. And so I think historically, if we look back at human civilization, we've done a pretty good job of adapting and solving these big problems. And so I believe in just the pace that some of the entrepreneurs move in our portfolio. I'm like, wow, this is a new paradigm. This is a new pace that people are setting for very, very difficult problems.
You give me hope and inspiration. I love that. And I also like how you talk about the younger generation. Now it's actually time for the younger generation to ask Jon his question.
Questions from our future.
What do you want me to do different than your generation?
This coming generation could do a better job of having a healthier relationship with technology. Okay? There is a lot of wasted time on the digital tools that we have today, including social media. And I think that they are great, quote unquote, tools for communication and vocalizing your concerns, but the real change actually occurs in real life. Okay? And so it's important to remember that, is no matter what, having your metaverse, your Twitter profile, your TikTok, and to speak out about things that matter, that are important to you, or to even have entertainment, that's fine. But having a healthy relationship with that, if you are addicted to these experiences, I think it does a detriment to society, because that time could be better spent, at a minimum, enjoying time with your friends, enjoying a hobby, and at a maximum, solving all the problems we just talked about, which we think everybody needs to contribute to.
And I think that's something that we can start doing now.
Yeah.
Already. Everyone. Younger and older.
I think that we might look back at sort of the use of certain social media tools as, cigarettes, right?
Yeah.
And again, you can still have a smoke every once in a while. It's not going to kill you. But if you're having a pack a day, that's probably bad.
a good description, definitely. Thank you. It's time for the uncomfortable conversations.
Uncomfortable conversations.
Actually, this is one of the reasons why I brought you here. When we talked in Oslo, you mentioned the journey of being an entrepreneur and the backside of that, actually. And I know that there are many entrepreneurs listening out there who have a rough time building their business. Can you today have a balanced journey being an entrepreneur?
The tough answer is no. If you choose to be a large, venture scale startup entrepreneur, you're buying into and deciding to go on an extraordinarily hard and difficult journey. Elon Musk says it's like chewing glass, liking to taste of your own blood and staring into the abyss. Right?
Sounds
sounds
inspiring.
exciting, right? But that's the reality. What I failed at, I think, was, and what I would have done better, and this is what I tell entrepreneurs all the time, is like have those very close confidants that will hold you accountable for continuing to be a good person and also take care of yourself. So if an entrepreneur comes to me and they said, I'm having a hard time, or I'm feeling like I'm hitting a wall, or I'm burnt out, I was like, let's not talk about the business at all. Are you getting enough sleep? Are you exercising every day? Are you eating healthy? Are you drinking a lot? Are you doing other things? You know, if you don't start taking care of yourself first, then you're not going to do a good job working, like I said, 7 days a week. I was at the depths at a certain point during my company journey where my wife, thank God for her, sat me down and was like, you are off. Like, you are not showing up in the way that I need you to be. And you're not doing a good job for this family. And I know that it probably translates into other parts of your life, including the company. And so I wrote...
That was a brave conversation she had with you.
Well, her nickname is Steamroller, so she has no problem, telling me the truth. But I'm so thankful that she did that. And then I kind of sat down and wrote about it in Fast Company, and I'm happy to share the article afterwards. But I talked a little bit about this, which is that there's like a bullshit hustle culture in Silicon Valley, which is fine. It's important to work very hard, but you also have to take care of yourself. Right. And that means all of these things. And so I encourage entrepreneurs to ask willingly to friends and family and even an investor to say, like, hold me accountable, right? Like, make sure that I'm not only working hard, but I'm taking care of myself. And if my personality or the way that I'm talking or my actions start to become, off, then I want you to help me get back on track. And people don't do that, and founders don't do that. And I think it's incredibly important. I would say that, like, without my wife having done that, I don't think that I would have been able to sort of survive as long as we did.
But I also think that there is a human perspective from the investor side as well. As an investor, you're always like pushing, you need numbers, you need this, you need this, you need this. Is it, I mean, of course you're right. You as an entrepreneur need to take responsibility yourself for your own actions. Right. But is it also like a human responsibility, the investor's responsibility also to see that side when you're investing?
I think it is, but again, like I said, 90+% of investors, especially in Europe, have never started a company. And so they come in with a very adversarial relationship, right? What we try to do is empathize with founders at every turn, right? But we will push them when things are going well, be like, hey, you could go better here. Like, you could work harder. You could think bigger. And when times are hard, we're like, it's gonna be okay. You know what I mean? By the way, the vast majority of startups fail. And so they should know that.
As
and
an
by
investor,
the way, we still love you. We want to back your next company, right? If they did a decent job, if they did it humbly, if they worked their butt off and things just didn't work out, right? Like, we will be there to back their next company. And so I think what entrepreneurs can take away from what I'm saying here is, like, the more open you are with those that are around you, the more you're going to receive, right? And it's incredibly important to be vulnerable. Now, I say that with one big caveat, okay? your employees look to you as a leader, okay? Now, there's a certain level of vulnerability that you can deliver, but they also want you to be the captain who comes on when the turbulence is occurring and say, we're going to be okay, folks. We're just hitting a rough patch, and it might be a little bumpy here for a tiny bit of time, but we'll get you back on track and get your drinks and beverages out here very soon. They want you to be like,
I love that analogy.
It's very difficult. We're going through this bumpy time. I'm nervous. Like when COVID hit at my company, I was like, I have no idea what the future is going to hold, and if co-living is even a viable business anymore. And we are going to have to let some people go to save money. And this is the hardest things I've had to do. I literally cried in front of my entire staff. But then I said, like, I think that we can make it through this. I truly believe that we have something that's incredibly special. And then I had my investors show up, and they also gave that speech, right? And so I think that, that's an important caveat to make, which is like, have that trusted group of small set of advisors who you can lean on for everything and anything. For your employees, it's okay to be a little bit vulnerable as well, but don't overdo it. Because if you overdo it, then they're going to start to lose faith in you as a leader.
I think you summarized that in a very good way, and I think that that's also like it is an uncomfortable conversation to have. We don't speak enough about the mental health part when it is coming to entrepreneurial journeys and so on. So thank you for sharing, and thank you for mentoring and helping. My sunshine goes to you, and now you have the possibility to give sunshine to someone out there. Who you believe is a role model, who's doing something good, who you want to elevate and to let the sun shine on.
I want to thank Cameron, who started Giant. He wrote that angel check in my company, and he was there with me through that entire journey. And he was so kind to me, and so, I'm getting choked up even thinking about it. He would walk me into investor meetings. He would coach me on the side. He was empathetic when times were rough. And then after it was all over, he was like, come join me at Giant. You know what I mean?
Amazing, yeah.
And like, that's like a lifelong friend and a lifelong mentor. And he's also coached me on how to select investments. The most difficult job in investing is I have to say no to 999 companies and then we back one. You know what I mean? And so he's taught me a lot in that regard. So, he is Danish and Californian, so he gets a little bit of he gets half sun from California, and the Nordic sensibilities, as we like to say. But I would give that to Cameron.
Cameron, that one's for you. We're coming to an end.
Sad.
Yeah, but really inspiring conversation. If you would summarize your thoughts and what you bring with you from today's conversation, what would you say?
Yeah, I would say email me, any entrepreneur, at any time, Jon, Jon, @giant.vc, and tell me what you're going through, if it's good or bad, and I will always help. My door is always open. I want to hear from you. I want to hear what you're working on. I want to hear what the problems are. And I can try to help, right, and help you in the ways that I know that I can. So that's my most important message. And then the second thing is I don't have all the answers, right? Like a lot of what entrepreneurship is so great about is that the people that are on the ground doing the work are the ones that are solving the big problems today. And that's what gets me really excited about tomorrow. So when you have 11-year-olds asking questions about what the future holds, and you have entrepreneurs solving these big challenges, I think ignore the headlines that are saying that we're headed towards a climate disaster. Ignore the headlines about people becoming more pulled apart in society. Because the reality is what we see on the ground, on the day-to-day, is a completely different story. And so that's what gets me excited. So if nothing else, you listen to this podcast, hopefully you have a little bit more pep in your step for the rest of the week.
Thank you, Jon, for joining us here, and thank you for spreading the awareness and a lot of inspiration.
Excited to be here.
If you want to get more pep in your steps, I'm bringing that with me. Please make sure to subscribe to The Switch Not Just Another Podcast, wherever you are listening to your podcast, or at YouTube. We want to be with you. And the best absolute way to spread our podcast is to send it to someone you really care for that wants to get more pep in their steps. Woohoo! Woohoo! Great. And with that said, thank you for today. Thank you for listening, and looking forward to see you again. Take care of yourself, and if you can, please take care of someone else. See ya.